Late June 2026, France issued 54 red weather alerts. Spain placed 13 of 17 regions on orange or red. The UK broke its June record. 4 major European economies declared maximum heat emergencies on the same week, temperatures matching the 2003 wave that killed 70,000 people. The death toll is orders of magnitude lower, but far worse is still coming. I'm David. Late June 2026, France issued 54 red weather alerts. Spain placed 13 of 17 regions on orange or red alert. The UK broke its June temperature record with roughly 38 degrees Celsius, beating the 1976 mark. Italy's major cities, Rome, Florence, Bologna, Turin, all went red. For the first time in recorded history, 4 major European economies issued simultaneous maximum heat emergencies. According to Wikipedia, this rivals August 2003, which killed approximately 70,000 people across Europe, roughly 15,000 in France, 20,000 in Italy, 12,000 in Spain. In 2026, Spain and Portugal recorded 42.7 degrees Celsius on June 24. France's forecasts predicted 43 to 45 degrees. The temperatures matched the 2003 peak, but the death toll is orders of magnitude lower. France has recorded roughly 11 direct heat deaths so far. Spain saw 101 heat-related deaths during May's precursor wave. The UK recorded 12. Why? After 2003, France built the National Heatwave Plan, a forecasting and alert system that mobilizes resources before crisis peaks. It worked. The same thermal intensity that killed 70,000 in 2003 is killing dozens in 2026. But infrastructure wasn't rebuilt. Power grids, railways, nuclear plants, water systems, all engineered in the 1960s and 1980s for a cooler climate. Those systems are about to face temperatures 40+ degrees, day after day. And that's where the real threat lives. European rail networks, power grids, and housing stock were engineered in the 1960s and 1980s for a temperate climate with peak summers around 35 degrees Celsius. 40-degree heat now causes railway buckling, transformer failures, nuclear plant coolant restrictions, and structural stress. The 2003 wave hinted at it. But 2026 is making it systemic and cascading. Watch the flowchart. Design standard to thermal reality to infrastructure cascade. This is the mechanism that turns a heat wave into an economic and social crisis. Those infrastructure failures ripple outward, but the broader wound is running deeper. In the soil itself, crops are failing across the grain belts of Spain and Italy. Aquifer levels that fed irrigation for decades are running dry. Wheat, barley, staple harvests, all collapsing. This hits at exactly the wrong moment. Europe is still absorbing food price spikes from 2022-2025 inflation. Households were just stabilizing their grocery bills. Now, a drought-driven harvest collapse is spiking prices again, just as people thought the worst had passed. The mechanism is straightforward. Less supply, same demand, prices climb. But the politics are toxic. Governments that barely survived the last inflation cycle are now facing another one. They can't blame a war halfway around the world. They can only be blamed for failing to prepare. Governments sometimes survive inflation if people believe it's temporary and external. But a drought feels local. It feels like leadership failed to see it coming. And politically, that's far more dangerous than any external shock. The cost of food ties directly to public trust in whoever's in charge. Extreme heat spikes, electricity demand for air conditioning at the exact moment it degrades supply. Hydroelectric reservoirs drop because of drought, the same drought-killing crops. Nuclear plants face restrictions on how much warm cooling water they can discharge back into rivers. Thermal pollution regulations kick in when the water itself is already hot. Europe's grid is being squeezed from both ends simultaneously. Demand for electricity climbs as people run AC to survive the heat. Supply shrinks as hydro fails, and nuclear capacity tightens. The vicious cycle repeats year after year. The European Central Bank and major investment banks are now modeling this as a recurring annual threat, not a one-off crisis. Every summer, the same squeeze. Every summer, rolling power cuts, rationing, or massive price spikes. The 2003 heatwave was a wake-up call that Europe mostly snoozed through. The 2026 wave is showing that snooze button has limits. And when that grid fails, when rolling blackouts start hitting cities in real time, it becomes a test of political legitimacy. Voters don't care if the physics are complicated. They care if the lights stay on. Which is precisely what's happening now. Keir Starmer's Labour government in the UK, Emmanuel Macron's centrist coalition in France, Pedro Sanchez's left-wing coalition in Spain, and Giorgia Meloni's right-wing government in Italy are all absorbing public fury over heat deaths and infrastructure failures. None of them created the heatwave. All of them failed to adequately prepare for it. The political math is brutal. When governments can blame an external enemy or an act of God, voters sometimes grant grace. But we had decades to upgrade the power grid, and we didn't. Or we cut funding for cooling centers. That's a credibility wound that never fully closes. These governments run on margins that are already razor-thin. One more crisis, and a coalition breaks. Heat deaths concentrate among the elderly and poor, people without AC, trapped in their apartments. Those deaths are real. The political price is real. When blackouts hit in August and a city goes dark for a week, the cost accelerates fast. Governments don't fall because a heat wave happened. They fall because they're seen as having failed to handle it. But here's the problem. Underneath all of it, Europe promised to adapt, then didn't spend the money. Since 2021, EU member states have approved climate adaptation budgets and pledged funding for grid upgrades, cooling centers, and emergency health systems. But execution lags year after year. Projects get delayed. Spending approval takes months. Meanwhile, the warming trend accelerates. Temperatures peak higher, seasons shift earlier, the heat window stretches longer. The gap between what was promised and what was actually built is widening fast. It's not that the money doesn't exist. It's that political will fractured. Some member states prioritized their own economic recovery over shared adaptation. Some got tangled in budget disputes. Some believed the warming would level off before they needed to spend. They were wrong on all counts. The consequence is cascading now. Critical infrastructure upgrades that should have been finished by 2025 are still in planning phases. Cooling centers that should have been operational are being improvised in community centers and libraries. Nuclear plants still don't have the redundant cooling systems they need. This funding gap is about to become visible to every household in Europe. The European Central Bank and major investment banks are now modeling this as a chronic economic problem, not a temporary shock. Every year of extreme summer heat creates a cascade of drag on GDP. Productivity losses as people slow down in dangerous temperatures, insurance companies repricing their premiums upward, supply chains fracturing because ports and railways can't operate in peak heat, manufacturing output dropping. Capital is flowing away from climate-vulnerable sectors and regions. Think of it this way. If you're an investor looking at Southern Europe or the Mediterranean coast, where peak temperatures are now regularly exceeding 42 degrees, you're rethinking where to put new factories, new offices, new infrastructure. You're looking north. You're looking at relocating supply chains. You're pricing in the risk that your investment might be damaged by heat every single summer, year after year. That's not a one-time cost shock. That's a permanent repricing of an entire region's economic value. The drag compounds. A factory that runs fewer hours in summer produces less, pays fewer wages, generates less tax revenue. A tourism collapse in peak heat regions collapses local jobs. A shortage of insurance capacity makes it harder for businesses to operate at all. And none of this is being offset by growth elsewhere. So here's what the data points to. The June 2026 synchronized red alert across 4 major EU economies is probably not a one-time event. It's likely becoming an annual seasonal crisis, the new pattern, not the exception. True infrastructure adaptation, retrofitting millions of miles of rail lines built in the 1960s, replacing aging power grids with systems rated for 45-degree heat, building redundant cooling for every nuclear plant, redesigning agricultural zones for arid climates, relocating populations out of the hottest regions would cost orders of magnitude more than current budgets. We're talking multiple trillion euros across the continent, over decades. That requires political will. Europe hasn't summoned yet. It requires pulling money from social spending, from defense, from economic growth, and betting it all on a climate crisis that feels urgent only when temperatures spike above 40 degrees for a few weeks each summer. So Europe faces a stark choice: spend massively now and hurt economically in the near term, or drift forward, managing each summer crisis as it hits, watching the economic drag accumulate year after year until it becomes permanent. One path is painful upfront. The other is slowly corrosive. The data doesn't tell us which path Europe will take. It only shows us the window to choose is closing. Europe has the tools to adapt. It doesn't have the will. If you found this story worth 10 minutes, share it and subscribe so you see what happens next summer. I'm David. See you tomorrow.